All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be previewing a colossal showdown in the group of 5 ranks between UNLV and Boise State. Winner of this game will be the front runner for the nomination in the college football playoff. Likely to rematch again, but it certainly won't be ideal if they're just going to beat up on each other. So great opportunity to get ahead here, though. 3-point line in favor of Boise State, 16.5 is the total. 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS Sports Network from Allegiant in Las Vegas, Nevada. Starting with the Boise State offense. You know, obviously, Nick, there's a lot of great shows that go down nightly in Las Vegas, but on Friday night, the top one that's going to be in tour is going to be Ashton Jeanty, the Heisman Trophy favorite. You got to get your tickets while you can to see this guy play. I mean, what he's on doing right now, 1,248 yards, 17 touchdowns. I said this back in like week 3, and now everyone else is starting to get on board as well. And I was like, he has a legit shot of breaking Barry Sanders' records that are pretty untouchable for yards and touchdowns. And since then, he's, continued to put on an absolute clinic. I mean, this is a phenomenal player. It's not just the production, when it comes to watching him, the explosion is great, the contact balance. He's just a physical guy. It's hard to bring down with just a couple of guys, even one or two, Nick. He makes everybody miss. This is just a phenomenal player. He's going to control this game. Hawaii did a pretty good job of bottling him up. He still had, over 7 yards per carry, though, in that contest. But this is a highly efficient player. And, in a dome where obviously weather is not going to play a factor one bit, he figures to shine in a matchup like this against UNLV.
If you haven't watched Ashton Jeanty play this year, this is much-watched television for you. This is a guy that's an absolute difference maker. We knew coming into the season that he'd be a really key figurehead for this offense. He's a really solid running back coming in, but the explosion in production that he's produced this year was unfathomable at the preseason. He is such a phenomenal runner who's having an incredible season. 1,250 yards rushing, 9.9 yards per carry, 17 touchdowns, just incredible numbers. This guy is just an absolute freak. When you look at the betting odds, for him, anytime touchdown in a lot of these games recently has been like minus 450, just ridiculously low odds from a betting perspective because he's basically guaranteed to get a touchdown. Hawaii did bottle him up a little bit, which I think if you're looking for a blueprint here for UNLV, you got to watch the film from the Hawaii game because he did have a bit of a tougher day against the Rainbow Warriors. Now, granted, that's on the road after a tough travel, so it makes it a little bit more difficult, but he still had 217 yards and a touchdown in that game, so that's a bad day for him. It's still 200-plus yards, right? So this is a guy that's so tough to keep control, keep reined in, and he can really run all over you. The best show to watch, certainly in college football, has to be the Heisman frontrunner from my perspective based off the way things have gone right now. And it's a tough conversation that obviously I think a conversation that you and I will have at some point. We've had privately about what his Heisman stakes look like considering being a group of 5 school. If they lose this game, I think his Heisman ability takes a little bit of a hit, and that's not something that I personally believe in. I just think that's how the media and the people that vote, that's how it operates. A win here and a strong day from him will absolutely cement him as the front runner for the Heisman, in my opinion, and I really believe that he can have a strong day here in a nice environment, a domed environment. No weather is going to be an issue. He should be able to run all over this UNLV defense.
And it's more than just him to this offense. Obviously, it's a complete unit. Maddox Madsen at quarterback. This is a player who's been very complimentary. He has 12 touchdowns and 2 picks. His toughest game came on the road at week 2 against Oregon. Completed only 42% for 148 yards. Certainly not playing that type of defense here. And for the most part, he's been respectable on the road, so I certainly don't think there's any jitters there going up against the defense. There's a lot of ball hawks, though, but I don't expect him to be asked to do too much because they should be able to run the ball. I don't think there's any way they get stuck in the mud. But Matt State still has to be good. You have to be able to be sound off play action, find guys in the flat, intermediate range, just operate the offense at a calm tune. That's what he's done so far, over 200 yards per game. And the receiving group isn't all that deep. Cam Camper, you look at Indiana and how many ballers they have at receiver. This is one of their top guys from a year or two ago. He transfers in here to the Broncos. He's got 441 yards, 4 touchdowns on a team high 25 receptions. Team high in all those numbers, by the way. Matt Lauder at tight end. He's got 259 and 3 touchdowns. Other than that, it's not much, to speak of. Chase Pentry, solid. Latrell Caples, there's a few guys that get a couple of receptions a game. Then Austin Bolt has 3 receiving touchdowns. What do you think of this passing attack, Nick? Because I'd say for what they have in the backfield, they match it pretty well with their ability to stay in front of the chains, protect the football, and still produce, again, 200-plus yards a game.
They do match it pretty well. Protecting the football is definitely a key part. 2 interceptions from Madsen, who beat out Malachi Nelson, who was a high-level recruit who transferred over from USC. Madsen beat him out and got the starting job, and he's looked really good. It looked like that was a good decision by the coaching staff. 63% comp rate, 1,200 yards passing, 12 touchdowns. All really solid numbers. I think he's a really solid player right now. Like you said, 230 passing yards per game is a good number for an offense that has such a dominant running back that you'd expect them just to ground and pound the ball over and over again. They still can throw the ball. It complements the running game. It does balance it out. Camper is a really fun receiver to watch. The 17.6 yards per grab is very impressive. 4 touchdowns, solid numbers there as well. I like what I've seen out of him. The rest of the room, a little bit shallow, but I think some of these other pieces are not bad either, that they can really complement this rushing attack. And obviously, again, it's the J&T show, but this is an offense that does have some balance, a solid offensive line as well. I like what this Boise State offense can do, certainly.
Now you look at a Bronco offensive line paving the way for J&T. Cage Casey at left tackle is having a phenomenal year. He'll be a first-team all-conference guy. Ben Dooley at left guard hasn't allowed a sack. He's been very sound in run blocking. Zach Holmes, he's probably their biggest liability at center, especially against the pass. Tyler Caniff at right guard, also having a solid year. Then Hale Schmidt, also probably more of a liability at right tackle. What do you make of this offensive line, Nick, outside of the left tackle? There's no tremendous standouts, but collectively as a bunch, they play incredibly hard. They paved the way again for a lot of production on the ground, and they've only given up 3 sacks total, despite limited dropbacks compared to some other teams. But they're doing their job just as good as anyone in the country.
Yeah, they're doing their job, and they're really getting those lanes open for J&T, who's finding them, hitting the hole hard, and able to break away big touchdowns. I think there's no issues with offensive line. I think it's a good unit. I just said that a minute or two ago. Solid unit that's holding up well. I'm happy with this Broncos offensive line. They're continuing to pave the way for the running game, which is really the key for this offense, and I like what this offensive line's been able to do.
Now moving to the UNLV offense, obviously a couple weeks ago there was a giant drama of Matthew Sluka quitting on the team, and my assumption is this is going to die down. No one's going to really talk about this a couple weeks later, and they're not, and especially with Malik Williams playing as good as he is. Looks like he did them a favor. This is a player that's got 14 total touchdowns, putting up about 200 yards per game. He's been really good at throwing the football. Wasn't the most accurate against Oregon State, but in the weeks prior to that, he's been a very efficient guy. He had 3 passing touchdowns each in 3 straight games. So that's very impressive. I like what he brings to the table in terms of his athletic ability as well, and really complements this rushing attack, a triple option attack that is leading the way now. 390 yards and 4 scores. At running back, plenty of different guys. Jaden Thomas, Kylan James, Greg Burrell. They're going to get a handful of different guys involved in this ground attack. And, they've certainly had some tougher outings. Only 181 against Kansas, 188 against Oregon State. Syracuse, they weren't all that great, only 127 yards. So they've certainly been a battle-tested rushing attack, Nick, but this is still a part of this offense that has to be monitored. It's one that can burn you on any given play. It's kind of a complex scheme to defend, but when they have the balance that they do, UNLV's look really good.
This is an offense that is really balanced. Malik Williams has added that opportunity since he stepped in. When Matthew Soko went down, there's a lot of questions, or not went down, when he opted out, there were a lot of questions about what would become of this offense, but Malik Williams has really stepped in and been really good. 70% comp rate, 838 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks. He looks confident. He's really solid. A really good runner for this offense as well. Nearly 400 yards, 6.4 yards per carry, and 4 scores for him. This team is solid, 251 on the ground per game. They have gotten bottled up by a team occasionally, which I think certainly Boise State's going to look to try and take that advantage and stuff the run here and make them throw the ball. But I think Williams is really solid. He's got some nice wide receiving room around him, a decent running back room. Jedi Thomas is not bad for this team with 3 rushing touchdowns. Kalen James as well has 3 rushing touchdowns. So there is some production on the ground outside of Malik Williams, who's been really good for this team. I like this rushing attack. I think it's got some solid balance. It complements the passing well. These are 2 teams that run the ball very effectively in this battle.
And, of course, this is an offensive line. It's probably the best in program history. Jalen St. John at left tackle. He's had some issues in pass protection. Overall, been a consistent player. Anton Mbilu at left guard. He's a good, reliable starter. Their center as well is really not all that polished in Jack Hazen. But at the right side, I love what they have over here. Mathis Sua and at right tackle, Tiger Shanks. He's a flat-out elite player for them. Both of these groups have really good offensive lines. I'd say they're the best in terms of group of 5 teams. Shanks, again, at right tackle is just such a phenomenal player. And he's going to have to be big in trying to pave the way for some of these running backs and even Williams on the edge. And they're going to be facing the defense. It's very good against the run, though, Nick. So what do you expect from this O-line here? You think they're going to struggle a little bit, or you think they're going to dominate in Vegas?
I think they might struggle a little bit here. This is certainly the matchup advantage for for Boise State. That is, they're really good against the run. This offensive line has been a good unit here. Jalen St. John has been good. Tyler Sanks has been good as well. I like what they have in the interior as well. But this is a big Boise State defensive line that's a really strong unit. I like that matchup here. I think it's a solid matchup potential. If they can stuff the run, it certainly puts UNLV at a bit of a disadvantage because they have to go to pass first and try to air it out a little bit more, gets them off their tempo, and makes them a little bit more uncomfortable running their offense.
And of course, we look at the receiving group as well. And we've talked about this numerous times this year. It's only really a 1-2 punch. Casey Kane, the fourth leading receiver, he can be explosive at times, but it's really the Ricky White show. 46 receptions, 614, 9 scores, far and away the most on the team because he's a legit talent. Top 10 receiver in CFB, no doubt. Jacob DeJesus, who his counterpart, averages over 17 yards per catch. These guys are highly explosive. White, you can feed him the rock in this conference. He's just going to continue to tear up. And the Boise secondary hasn't really been all that polished this year. You can anticipate him getting a lot of work on Friday night.
Certainly going to get a lot of work. Ricky White's a fun player to watch. 46 receptions for him, a ton of grabs. The second highest receiver on this team has 17. That's DeJesus. 6'14", 13.3, and 9 scores. Really good numbers from White. He's been phenomenal this year. DeJesus has been solid as well, though. Just below 300 yards receiving, 17.2 yards per grab, and 2 scores. Kane has that big play potential, 14.6 yards per grab, 2 scores, while some other players have a couple grabs here and there. This offense, though, this is the Ricky White show. Certainly worth tuning in to see Janty and White. These are two of the best players in the nation at their respective positions that are really fun to watch. Janty's getting all the love for the Heisman, obviously, and rightly so, but White is one of the best receivers in the nation. Certainly worth watching Friday night.
Now you look at a Boise State defense. They've been phenomenal against the run this year. They have given up 9 touchdowns. 4 of those came in the season opener, though. 3 yards per attempt allowed. Have not given up more than 150 yards in a game. They played Oregon, Nick, week 2 and held them to 109 yards. I think that's all you need to know to understand they're a legit defense. And I know they've played some weaker opponents, even though Washington State can run the ball, held them to only 89 yards. Hawaii only had 15. So, I mean, this is a team that's a legit run defense. They've played respectable opponents so far this year to prove that. It starts with guys like Jaden Virgin Morgan, defensive end Ahmad Hazainen. He's phenomenal, leads the team in numerous categories. You have a guy in Braxton Felly, who is not a great tackler, struggles against the run a little bit. Herbert Gums, Michael Callahan. It's a nice defensive line they have here outside of Ahmed. They don't really have too many standouts, but he has 7.5 TFLs, Nick. I certainly think that he is a great player for them. And when it comes to slowing down the run, this is a very complimentary unit because their linebackers aren't all that productive. Andrew Simpson, 5th in tackles. Marco Notarani, he's 8th in tackles. So this is a team that gets a lot of help out of everybody. And this defensive line, I think, has been a big reason why they're so good against the run.
This is a good defensive line. They're a really strong unit. Hassenen has been really solid. 25 total tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. Jaden Virgin has been really solid for this team as well. He's a really big player. Virgin Morgan, that is. He's a very strong physical player. 18 total tackles, 5 sacks for him. Braxton Fly has 13 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Herbert Gums has 12 total tackles and a sack, while Michael Callahan has 6 total tackles plus a pass breakup. He's a good rotational depth piece coming in the defensive tackle position as a graduate senior. I like what this unit can do. This is a strong unit against the run. They've been really good this year. They're facing a tough task in a UNLV team that can certainly run the ball and hit you with their quarterback running or with their running back room. That's a really solid unit overall. This is a tough test for them, right? They're going to have to stand strong here. This is a big battle. This is the key battle I'm looking at on Friday night is can Boise State win that battle in the trenches? Can this defensive line that has some really talented pieces get the job done, stuff the run, force UNLV to pass the ball?
4 sacks in the game against Oregon, 8 each against Wazoo and Hawaii, 29 on the year. So this Boise State pass rush, they certainly have some nice versatility, a couple of different players that get involved. You look at their secondary, this is a team that certainly has been playing ahead for most of the games, but the secondary still has not been all that good. Only 1 interception on the year, 1,600 yards total, on a per-game basis, about 276. That's one of the lower marks in the country. Oregon, they were able to complete a high percentage. They do that against everybody, though. But this is a secondary that they're good in terms of run support, in terms of open field tackling, but in terms of coverage, I think it's still a little bit iffy at this point. At safety, Zion Washington hasn't been all that good. Ty Benefield, I think, has probably been the most impressive in the back end for them. In the slot, he plays that role as well. He gets a lot of reps for this team. Amarian McCoy is a really good corner. Jeremiah Irby, the Cal transfer, has been very good in tackling and against the run. McCoy, same can't be said for him. Big responsibilities out wide, Nick, because obviously UNLV is going to look to run the football a lot, so they're going to have to be sound in, maybe not just making the tackles, but trying to, have discipline and holding their lanes so the rest of the group can rally. This just seems like an opportunity for Ricky White to kind of tee off on this secondary. And again, I think there'll be inconsistencies on the edge in terms of tackling that UNLV will be able to exploit.
I worry about this linebacking core and the secondary as well. I think the secondary has some solid players. Ty Benefield leads the team in tackles, 35 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. He has the team's lone pick plus a pass breakup. For him this year, Zion Washington, 34 total tackles, 5 pass breakups, 2.5 tackles for loss. been a really good coverage asset, as has Amarion McCoy, who has 19 total tackles, a tackle for loss, and 7 pass breakups. He's been really good as a coverage asset. I like what he's been able to do. He looks strong in the secondary, a good leader for this team, a nice player in coverage. There's some other pieces that are okay in the secondary, but this is a unit, like a Devon Banks, a transfer who's not having a terrible season, 15 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a sack, and 2 pass breakups. They use him in a couple different ways here. The secondary, they're not great against the pass, right, because the stats you rattled off there, the numbers are not phenomenal. 276 is definitely a low number. Here, obviously, UNLV more of a rushing attack, so it's certainly not the worst matchup advantage, but if Hodge Williams is on his game and completing passes to Ricky White and hitting the targets like he's supposed to, this could be a long day for this Boise State secondary. They're not a good unit at getting interceptions. They don't have a significant amount of pass breakups either. Certainly a tough matchup when you're going against a really talented wide receiver that even if you double him, he's still going to find a way to get things done. Definitely a tough matchup, and if the UNLV wants to win this game, it's going to rely on picking apart the secondary, attacking the weak part of the defense, and getting nice chunk plays to get that job done.
Now looking at the UNLV defense, this is a group that's certainly serviceable against the run. Gave up 200 against Kansas. Syracuse was able to rip up some big, nice runs in their only loss. Oregon State, they held them in check. That's a pretty good rushing attack. They held to $137. Them and the Orange both were held to that number. And you're not going to slow down Gianti. He's probably still going to have his 150, 200 yards. But you got to make it hard for him. Be physical. You got to rough him up. And I think that's where the potential for UNLV is, pretty substantial because they have great linebackers in Jackson Woodard and Manai Powell. Woodard obviously put on a clinic against Syracuse. He ended up getting, burned there late. Dropped the game-winning interception, was not able to make the game-winning tackle at the goal line. I mean, this is a guy who's a very impressive player, though, plays hard. 4 interceptions for him while leading the team and numerous other statistics. I mean, his coverage skills are absurd. This is a D-line, though, that certainly doesn't have as much name recognition. I think Antonio Doyle Jr. has been good for them. And it's kind of been a by-committee approach up front for the Rebels. That's going to be the game. Alex Whitmore, Jalen Dixon, some of these guys have just been kind of average players. Keith Conley Jr. They're going to have to rough up Gianti, Nick, and start with this D-line. They haven't been bad, but again, there's no real standouts that are just going to blow things up in the backfield. That's going to put extra stress on these linebackers, which they're capable of handling it.
This is certainly a bit of a weaker defensive line in front part of this defense. I think Jackson Woodard's, a really great linebacker, really good for this team. 6'3" total tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 4 picks, 8 pass breakups. Stat sheet suffer, do it all. Monty Powell has been really solid. Has he come into this defense? He's been really good as a junior transfer for this team. 46 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. So Marcel McDuffie has 8 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack. Antonio Doyle has been good, 25 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, a pass breakup. I like what he's been able to do. He's a solid piece. Jalen Dixon, Cooper Webb, these are guys that have to step up and be strong here. Alexander Whitmore, 21 total tackles. He's got to be better here. Dixon has only 12 and 1.5 sacks. He's got to be better in this game as well. I need to see a lot because, Gianti's going to obviously attack you, get his yards, but you need to rough him up. You need to bang up a little bit. I think it's a very fair assessment there. Got to find a way to get after the quarterback, though. Put some pressure on the quarterback when they are throwing the ball.
Now you look at the secondary for UNLV. They're 126th in pass defense, while Boise's 124th. And obviously this is a team that also plays from ahead for the most part. Utah State had 461 passing in that game. That was a game they were ahead of in big, though, Nick, and they were just throwing it a lot, and they were really teeing off on them. A week earlier, though, against Syracuse, the best offense they've faced up until this point. Kyle McCord was dealing. He was throttling them. A lot of open space was allowed. A lot of tight window throws they were not able to capitalize on. You're not going to see anything like that with Boise. But again, Cam Camper, certainly a very talented player. With how good Gianti is, play action could certainly burn you. The lone difference between the two secondaries, though, is that 13 interceptions for UNLV. I mean, this is a ball-hawking unit. They play with a lot of energy. They're no fluke one bit, I would say, here in the back end. The addition to Jalen Catalan at safety has been tremendous. He's got 4 of those picks. Jonathan Baldwin at his DB spot, he's also been tremendous. I mean, this is a team that's got great players. Tony Grimes has been an important player for them transferring over. Cam Oliver, the other corner. So I really like what the secondary provides, and I think a lot of these yards, other than the Syracuse game, was just from them playing from ahead, Nick. I love what they have. They have good players everywhere. Baldwin in the slot, the 2 corners I alluded to, and then Catalan in the back end at safety. Very good group they have here. They're going to have to be highly important themselves in run-stopping prowess, but when it comes to forcing turnovers, man, I would bank on them coming up with a couple.
I think they can get a couple here. This is a really good secondary. That's a ball-hawking secondary. Jalen Catalan has been incredible. 55 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, a sack, 4 picks, which one of them he returned for a touchdown, 3 pass breakups. Really good numbers there. Jonathan Baldwin's been solid, 45 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 picks, 6 pass breakups. I like what he's been able to do. Malik Chavez has been good for the secondary as well. He's been solid at times, 22 total tackles. He needs to be a little bit better in coverage. Cameron Oliver, 5 pass breakups plus a pick, 21 total tackles. He's been great in coverage, as has Tony Grimes, 4 pass breakups and 12 total tackles for him. This is a good secondary. The stats are a little misleading, I think, because they play from in front a lot. Same thing with Boise, though. The stats are a little misleading on both these secondaries, although I certainly would take the UNLV secondary. I think it's a better unit pound for pound, certainly.
Now looking at pound-for-pound team comparisons, that quarterback I give the edge to UNLV. Running back, no discussion there. Wide receiver, Ricky White. It's really him against Cam Camper because both of these teams just feed their number one a lot, and he's going to get the edge there. Offensive line, I really want to call this even, but when you're paving the way for, Barry Sanders-type records, I got to give you the edge up front, even though UNLV is very sound in their own right. D-line for Boise, generating a lot of sacks and big-time negative plays. While linebacker in the secondary, UNLV will get the edge. What is your opinion on this one, Nick?
This makes a lot of sense to me. I think this is one of the better ones that we've put together as of late. I think these teams have their clear advantages at each position. I think White's the best wide receiver in the field. I think Janty's obviously the best running back on the field. And I think the quarterback, Hajj Malik Williams, due to his capabilities as a runner, really does add an interesting dynamic. The secondary linebacking core are very dominant for UNLV, while Boise State is a really great team in the trenches and solid on the offensive line. That's the one that's probably the closest, but I think Boise State's offensive line gets the nod because they're just having the better season overall, in my opinion. These are two balanced teams, but I do think that where we've ranked everything kind of makes a lot of sense given the strengths of each of these teams.
Looking at the final thoughts on the prediction, keys to the game for Boise. Got to contain the Rebs on the boundary versus the run and don't let White take over. For UNLV, you need to rough up Gianti as much as possible, execute some long, grinding drives. This is going to be a great game, high scoring. Boise only being a 3-point favorite, I think is warranted, and I think it's respectable. But it's also interesting considering they have right now the best player in college football, and I just think that Boise's going to win the game. I just think that the offense will certainly have more balance. I think Ricky White's going to have a big game. Will Boise be able to come up with some more stops? I think they will because of their ability to create negative plays in terms of sacks. Of course, UNLV, they do a much better job of forcing turnovers. But Boise's not going to be put in a position too often to do that. They're going to throw the ball, maybe 15, 20 times most likely. So it's going to be hard to create turnovers. It's not going to be tough plays from Madsen to put the ball in harm's way. Still, 35-30, I think it will be a close game, and I think the rushing attacks will take over Sin City, Nick. This is a great game, and I think Boise, we're going to go ahead and root for him because how cool would it be to see Ashton Gianti in the playoffs because he's going to give you a chance against anybody.
I think you and I agree on basically everything at this game. I also have a 5-point win. A few more points scored in my game. I think it will be a high-scoring affair going down in Sin City on Friday night. This is a type of game that you really look for on a slate of two teams, pound for pound, really good, have similar advantages, and the best team is going to go out there and win. This is the Mountain West's best, this is the Group of Five's best, in my opinion. Both these teams have one loss to really good Power 4 teams, losing to the best team in the country right now, according to the rankings in Oregon, while also UNLV lost to a good Syracuse team that's overachieving in the ACC. I like what this matchup can provide. This is a great game to be highlighted on Friday night. I'm going to pick Boise State because I think Ashton Gianti will be the difference maker, gets the job done in the end, and I think I agree that they're not going to throw the ball a whole lot for Boise State, limiting the opportunity for UNLV to capitalize and force turnovers. Expect Gianti to have a strong day. Expect the defense to be good for Boise State, get a few stops when they need to. This is an exciting matchup. The person who wins this game certainly puts themselves in the driver's seat for the Group of 5 playoff spot, and the Mountain West looks to be in the best position to get that spot given their resumes overall. This Boise State team is fun to watch. I want to keep watching them, but UNLV is a lot of fun to watch too. This is a very serious team that's overcoming some drama as well. That's got some cool storylines. This is a great matchup going down Friday night.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.